Vajra Sattva Samaya Manupalaya Vajra Sattva Tenopa Tishta Didro Me Bhava Sutto Kayo Me Bhava Supo Kayo Me Bhava Anurakto Me Bhava Sarva Siddhi Me Prayatsan Sarva Karma Sutsame Citam Shriyama Kuruhum Ha 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 ho Bhagavan Sarva Tattagata Vajra Mame Munsa Vajra Bhava Maha Samaya Sattva Ahom Pe Simche Neba Chinye Pa Nyurtu Nele Targir Chi Drove Nini Malupa Taktu Chungwa Mebra Sho Menama Tudan Dembada Sangha Deju Drubayi Kandro Simbo Lasopa Ninje Simdan Dengyur Chi Chonama Kuna Ludan Sim Dunga Neba Chinyepa Teda Dagi Sonamanki Dega Gyatso Topa Resho Taye Drova Sile Trache Chir Tame Melamal Hasama Tapetu Lume Kuncho Sumdan Tudobache Transon Tuye Denzin Drup Gyurchi Locho Sampo Pagyo Trashi Pa Tuche Tempe Trinle Yarngo Da Pelge Drolor Zampe Zeparache Pande Lame Shabla Solvade Oma Guru Vajradara Sumati Munisha Sane Karm Utta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Hum Oma Guru Vajradara Sumati Munisha Sane Karm Utta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Hum Oma Guru Vajradara Sumati Munisha Sane Karm Utta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Pakyuke Kudan Dagi Lu Pakyuke Sungdan Dagi Nga Pakyuke Tukdan Dagi Yerme Chikto Chingi Alo Makyuke Kudan Dagi Lu Makyuke Sungdan Dagi Nga Makyuke Tukdan Dagi Yerme Chikto Chingi Alo Om Muni Muni Maha Muni Shakya Munye Svoha Sangye Chedan Tsogi Chonam La Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapso Chi Dagi Chinso Gibe Sonam Ki Drola Pinchra Sangye Drupara Sho Sangye Chedan Tsogi Chonam La Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapso Chi dagi jinso gibe sonam, drola pinchira sange drupar sho sange chodan sogi chonamla jancho pardo dani kyapsu chi dagi jinso gibe sonam ki drola pinchira sange drupar sho. Nel Buddha, nel Dharma,
Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. Through the practice of generosity and the other perfections, may I obtain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings.
in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. Through the practice of generosity and the other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Namo alhaye ke dan ludan chin ke rubuda da mi ke namda drowa kuinge dhanama che tsampa tamche ke to dagi che tento tamche ke to dagi che tento. Buongiorno.
Good morning.
Certe volte,
Sometimes,
per poter
in
entrare
order to get in touch, comprehend
l'unità di qualcosa, per comprendere
the
qualcosa,
unity of something as a whole,
abbiamo bisogno prima di
we need
comprendere le
first
parti.
to understand the different parts.
È un po' per dire c'è un gruppo di
It's like saying there is like a group of people. In order to be
vedere il
able to
gruppo,
see
riconoscere
the
il
group,
gruppo, vedere
recognize
le
the
sue
group,
qualità,
and see its
devo anche
qualities,
permettermi
I
di
need to
vedere
allow
ognuno
myself to
dei
also see
componenti
each
del
one of
gruppo,
the
capire
components
le
of the group,
caratteristiche
to understand the
specifiche che ci
specific
sono,
characteristics that are
per
there,
arrivare al fatto che
to
la
get to the
somma
fact that the
delle
sum of
parti
the
in
parts
realtà è più
actually
grande che
is
l'insieme delle
greater
parti.
than the
Però devo
whole,
vedere le parti,
but I need to be able to
devo
see
poter vedere le
the
varie
parts,
parti.
the various things.
E questo accade
And
anche
this happens also
quando, come posso dire,
when
quando c'è qualcosa che in sé
there is something that by itself
è quasi praticamente
is
come se
almost
fosse
as if there
indivisibile.
was
Ma per comprendere
indivisible.
quell'unione dobbiamo
But in order to
primeramente
understand
prima
that union, first of all,
poterla
we
dividere.
need to be able to divide
Anche
it.
perché
Also because
noi partiamo da un luogo
we
in cui
start
abbiamo una
from a
visione
place where we have a separate view.
cerco di spiegare.
I try to explain.
Cercando di spiegare
I'm trying
qualcosa.
to explain something that is quite complex.
Ritorniamo all'immagine del mandala.
Let's go back to the image of the mandala.
Se noi vediamo, partendo
If we
sempre
see,
dall'esterno,
still starting from outside,
abbiamo la barriera
we have the
Vajra e quella
Vajra
del
barrier and the lotus barrier.
questa simbologia la
And this
troveremo in
symbology, we will find
tantissimi
it in
luoghi diversi.
many different places.
Per esempio,
For example,
il mantra più
the
diffuso nel
most
buddismo
known
tibetano,
mantra in the Tibetan
Mani
Buddhism, Om Mani Padme Hum,
quello che viene utilizzato alla parte finale
the final
dell'autoguarigione,
part of the self-healing, the so-called secret initiation. Mani means jewel, because if we see together with the Vajra barrier, there are those dots that represent also jewels. Pema means flower, the lotus flower. So the mantra says Om, means body, speech and mind. It means many things, but represents the being, body, speech and mind. The Om syllable is divided in three parts. A, Om, E, Ma, that makes Om. So it represents also body, speech and mind on a gross, subtle, very subtle level. It depends how it's interpreted. In this case, we just say body, speech and mind, Om. Mani is jewel. Peme Padma, lotus flower, Hum, the union of the two. Hum represents the being, body, mind, very subtle in the union of the lotus flower and the jewel.
Ovviamente fior di
Of
lotus
course, lotus flower and jewel is a symbology,
che fanno riferimento a tante
and they refer to many things, among which male and female energy. So we have the lotus flower representing the female energy, female part, and the jewel, the male energy. And when we talk about male and female here, it's actually something that transcends very much man and woman. It's not about man and woman. It's about something that we all have, one part and the other. And we can spend hours here discussing, analyzing what are the characteristics that we have that are more in the so-called male aspect and the characteristics that are more in the female aspect, and so on. We can see this from the point of view of the brain, the right part, the left part. We can see this for what is about the more rational, more emotional part. We can see this in the aspect in the hormones. There are many aspects. But the goal is actually the one of the Hum, where you take one part of ourselves, you see it, you recognize it, you valorize it, you value it, you take care of it. Another part of us, you take care of it, you see it, you value it, and then you allow the two to unite and become one thing.
Noi abbiamo molto spesso questa
We
tendenza di
often have this tendency of going from one extreme to the other. Either it's like that or like that. But actually, the ideal thing is that it's neither like this nor like that. It's the ensemble of the two that becomes something else.
questa
And
analogia.
this analogy is given. Let's imagine like a water container.
Se io prendo per
Like if I
esempio
take for example, now I don't really do it because it's not the case, but a bit we
Qui io
can
c'ho
do it.
l'acqua della
Here
tazza,
I have the
l'acqua
water
del
of the cup
bicchiere,
and the water of the glass,
giusto?
right?
Cosa succede?
Okay, what happens?
Io posso molto bene dire
I can very well say that there are two different waters,
una e una.
one and one.
Nel momento in cui io vado a
The moment
versare
that I pour
una nell'altra,
one in the other, and
che in questo caso l'acqua della
in this
tazza è
case
gialla perché c'è lo zafferano, l'acqua del
the water of the cup is yellow because there is saffron, and the one of the glass no. And I put them together, and so
dentro
inside of this
bicchiere deve essere
glass,
l'acqua del
now
bicchiere, c'è
the
ancora
water of
l'acqua,
the glass is it still there?
sì, e l'acqua della
Yes,
tazza
and the water of the cup
anche.
also.
Però riesco a
But am I
distinguere
able
una
to
dall'altra?
distinguish one from the other?
Quindi ci sono
No,
tutte
so
e due,
there are
però
both of
non
them,
posso più
but I'm
distinguere
not able
una
to
dall'altra.
distinguish one from the other
Questo è il
anymore.
tipo di unione.
This is the type of union of which we're talking about.
È un'unione
It's
nella
an union
quale
where
le parti
the
che si
parts
sono unite ci
that
sono tutte,
summed up
non si
are
sono
both there.
annullate.
They didn't cancel each other,
Si sono messi
but
insieme in
they
tal
put
modo che non si può
themselves
più
together with each other so
distinguere
that
l'uno
you
dall'altro.
can't distinguish one from the other anymore.
E questo è quello che si
And
intende
this is what is meant when we talk about the union of male and female. When we talk about the union of method and wisdom, method is about the male part, and also to the part of love and compassion. And in our more Western view, to us, it was almost seem more that the male would be like the part of the wisdom and the female the part of the love. Actually, it's the opposite. Why? Because, first of all, when what we mean here by the part of love and compassion is not really an aspect that is so emotional, of feeling, but is something much more of much more practical somehow. The concept of love is that I want you to be happy and I will do what I can in order for you to be happy, to help you. I have a compassion, I don't want you to suffer. I do what I can in order to help you to not suffer. It doesn't mean that I need to suffer because you're suffering. That is not compassion. That is
Mentre dall'altra parte la saggezza
on the other hand, wisdom has nothing to do with intelligence, practical intelligence. Intelligence is something deeply intuitive, deeply non-rational. Is where we're able to perceive, experience something in a coherent way, where we're able to see and experience something as being impermanent, Without even thinking about it, we're able to live reality as being interdependent, without having to think about that. So it's something much deeper and intuitive. And this deeper aspect, this intuitive aspect, is represented by the female aspect. And the more practical, more related to action is represented by the male aspect. Which, I repeat, doesn't mean like man or woman. It means characteristics that we all have. Ideally, they should be balanced. Even better when they mix in one thing, when there are both of them. And this is about not just inner aspects, but also outer aspects. I believe that in any context, we very often have in our society many imbalances, also for what is about the part man, woman, roles, positions, recognition, and so on. And there is an important work in our society also of trying to give more importance to the female part in many aspects. Think about, for example, the salaries, okay, recognitions in the society, roles of importance, and so on. But the goal is not, how shall I put it, to remove one part and add another one. For me, the goal is when we are in a context where there is no more distinction. I don't know if this is clear. But where the characteristics of each one are recognized and valued.
Dove è un po' come noi abbiamo nei 5 Dhyani Buddha.
It's like in the 5 Dhyani Buddhas, we have the 5 wisdoms. There is the wisdom of equanimity and the wisdom of discernment. The wisdom of equanimity is our capacity of seeing what is similar among the parts. So I look at all of you, and my capacity of saying, you're all human beings, or at least it seems, the capacity of putting you in the same category. And this is part of the so-called wisdom of equanimity. And then, if this wisdom, this capacity of discernment goes deeper, one could say, okay, you all want happiness and don't want to suffer. We are all together in the samsara. We can go deeper and deeper. But this is called the wisdom of equanimity, where we see and recognize what we have in common. The wisdom of discernment is, on the other hand, our capacity inside of what is common, recognizing and giving value to the specific characteristic of each one. We're all human beings. We all want to be happy and no one of us wants to suffer, but each one is different in many aspects. Each one has particular characteristics. So, in the same way, for me, the ideal balance is when the various parts can be together, where the whole is something that becomes inseparable by every part, and almost you cannot distinguish one from the other. But inside of this whole, the characteristics of each one of the parts is valued and can be seen.
È chiaro questo come idea, sto cercando di mettere in parole qualcosa.
I'm trying to put into words something that I don't know if it's so clear.
E questo viene rappresentato in tante cose.
And this is represented in many different things. For example, the 2 symbols and most important ritual objects are these 2, which are called the Vajra, Dorje in Tibetan, and the word Dorje literally is the same word used also for diamond, which means also indestructible, indivisible, but it's a word where there is no real translation, so we maintain the word Vajra. And the other bell, which is easier to translate.
Ok, come simbologia mi sembra che sia molto chiaro quale
The symbology seems very clear what represents the male energy and female energy.
è autoevidente.
It's self-evident.
Però esistono tre parti. In
But
realtà il
there are
simbolo è fatto
three parts. Actually, the symbology is made out of three parts. I have the Vajra, male energy, method, love, compassion, bliss,
corpo.
body.
Io ho la campana
I have the bell that represents the female energy, represents wisdom, the correct view of reality, making a distinction is about the part of mind. These are the two first symbols. Then there is a third symbol that is called the mudra. Mudra, in Tibetan is translated as Chagya. Chagya can be translated in many ways. It also means seal. It means something that becomes indivisible. And so the mudra is the union. This would be the mudra. Then mudra is also translated for the gestures that you do in the various practices. But in this case, the mudra means the indivisible union, non-dual union of the male and the female, the method and of the wisdom.
Okay. E questo è qualcosa
And this is something that in many, many moments we will find it back. Again, for example, even when we have a seed syllable, seed syllables, when they're written in Tibetan, this in Sanskrit, also in Sanskrit and Tibetan works well because Tibetan language, even if it was a language that didn't have origin from Sanskrit, the Tibetan writing was copied from Sanskrit writing. So the language itself doesn't have originally to do with Sanskrit, but the writing that is used comes from Sanskrit. And so when they're represented, the sound of the M or the Ma is represented in some cases with a small dot. For example, if we do the Om, you see the letter that is the A with the O, and then you have a circle that is called the Tigle in Tibetan that does the sound of Ma. So in the Hum you have the Ha, a small A, making it a longer Ha, and then you have the Hu doing Hu, and that small circle on top that does Ma. Here also, again, the body and the Tigle represent also this, the union of method and wisdom, male and female. That also this union represents another thing, if you want. There is another goal. There is the union of the relative and absolute.
Del
conventional and of the ultimate. I try to explain myself better now. I'm getting into things that are more complex.
In pochissime parole.
In a very few words, trying to explain.
Noi viviamo in una realtà soggettiva.
We live in a subjective reality that is interdependent, and everything exists, like the sound of the bell, the book that I take in my hands. This book exists as a book in a web of relations and an attributed value. This is its relative reality. On the subjective, relative level is a book. On a level that is called absolute, the absolute level is the fact that this book doesn't exist as a book, as an autonomous, independent thing. What is the ultimate nature of the book? That the book is empty and doesn't have an autonomous, independent, objective existence. In other words, the absolute reality is the lack of an identity and of an absolute reality. The objective reality is the lack of objective reality. And so, if I ask, is the glass existing in a subjective or objective way? subjective. So it's empty of intrinsic objective existence because it's subjective, lacks an objective existence. The book, also this, lacks an objective existence. So, what is the ultimate nature of the glass, the book? Lacking objective existence. This is the same for everything. And so, in reality, relative and absolute are nothing else but two manifestations of the same thing. Also, these two mix into one thing. They are two parts of the same thing, where we need to see the parts to comprehend the whole.
Quando si parla di un Buddha,
When we talk about a Buddha, one of the main characteristics when we talk about a Buddha is this state, body, mind, speech, indivisible, where the body is the manifestation of matter, mind is the part of consciousness, thoughts, feelings, emotions. One doesn't exist without the other. And here there is another point for me very beautiful, and when we are able to see it is like in English we will say mind-blowing. We ask ourselves the question, what comes first, matter or consciousness? It's one of the matters that also recently there have been many discussions and things like that, and I don't want to get into the aspect of physics or and so on. From my comprehension, it's like asking what came first, the running or the runner? They are mutually dependent. It means two manifestations of the same nature. And so, what does this bring us to? Body and mind come together, they are of the same nature. And the Buddha represents this union of body and mind as one thing in a pure state, free from tension, conflicts, suffering. It means that it exists in a state where it is able to have a sane, healthy interaction constantly. And one of the main symbols that represents the state of enlightenment is the union, non-dual union, in perfect harmony of the male and female, of love and wisdom. This state that is called the bliss, representing the relative, that is the state of the mind that realizes the nature of everything, the emptiness, so-called emptiness. And so, for this, when we talk about a Buddha, what it represents, the name itself and the representation, the symbolic representation that we have of a Buddha, how it's represented in Vajrayana Buddhism, because we have the historical Buddha, Buddha Shakyamuni, like Buddha Shakyamuni, that we have here. Then if we see here in the temple, we have behind me, there is this sort of blue window with Akshobhya, and above, in the middle, there is Buddha Vajradhara. Buddha Vajradhara has Dorje and bell with the Hagi Mudra, in union with the mother Vajradhatu Ishvari, blue in color. Dark blue color represents the union of all colors. Buddha Vajradhara represents the union of the 5 Dhyani Buddhas. So it's like putting all the colors together and it becomes like a sort of dark blue. Then I never tried to take the 5 colors to mix them and see what comes out, but it's represented with the dark blue color, like the union of all colors. Where this represents also what is in the nature of everything. And Buddha Vajradhara, this Vajra means indivisible. Dhara means that sustains, that holds in his hands. Dorje Chang. Chang means to hold. So, he or she, because there is no division. Vajradhara is womb, sustains, upholds the non-duality, the indivisibility. In the symbol of his image is clear, of love, compassion, method, wisdom, male energy, and wisdom, correct view of reality, female energy, Dorje and Bell, that puts them together in a non-dual way. So what is it upholding? What does it hold? Owns, the word itself says it. Vajradhara, that is the representation of a Buddha, actually is showing the inner qualities through an external symbology. Dark blue color shows the union of the 5 Dhyani Buddhas and all their qualities. The union of male and female represented in the most direct way than what we are able to see in our direct mundane reality. The sexual union is the most obvious symbol of death. So when we see Vajradhara hugging Vajradhatu Ishvari, then Vajradhatu also means space. There is a whole symbology in this case where the consort Vajradhatu Ishvari represents the unlimited space, the part, the emptiness itself, and where Vajradhara represents bliss. So in this case, male and female represent the male, the part of bliss, the part of the body and mind that realizes, and the female represents what is realized, that is the ultimate nature of everything, that is represented also by the unlimited space. And these two unite in the union, and the union in its excellent way is the union where one doesn't feel and perceive anymore the difference between one and the other and becomes one thing.
Perciò, quando noi vediamo la simbologia,
so when we see the symbology that there is in Vajradhara, it's the symbology that shows us in many ways, from the Hagi Mudra, the right hand is method, love, compassion, the left is the female, wisdom, they unite together, Vajra and Bell, same symbology, the union of the male and the female in a sexual union, the same symbology. We have many things to say. Okay, if you didn't understand with one symbol, I give you another. If you didn't understand with that, I give you another one. But the fundamental point is the fact that internally it is a very subtle state of union of the non-duality of love, compassion and wisdom, the perfect harmony of what is called the male and female. The word in Tibetan that is used is Sumchuk, that is the state of union. That is the name that is given to enlightenment itself. Why are we talking about all of this? Because we are in the moment of practice where we are asking for the blessings, and the blessings start from the principle of interacting with something that is virtuous, sane, positive, in order to influence ourselves positively, to develop it. And when I visualize that Buddha in front of me, actually one of the most powerful things is to allow ourselves to connect with those qualities of the Buddha. For this, for example, it's for this because that we do the offerings. When we do the offerings, I have explained this morning before in the practice, when we do the offerings, Guru Buddha receives them and generates a new sensation of bliss and emptiness. This bliss and emptiness is repeated innumerable times. Why? Because it represents the most profound, deep quality of an enlightened being. This inner state of non-duality, of union, where there is body and mind, rational part, emotional part, where there is the part of the male and female, where there is the relative with the absolute, it's put together.
Noi di solito è interessante
We usually, this is interesting because when we talk about bliss and emptiness, our tendency is to try to
vedere che è come
see
che due cose che si
that it's like two
sommano, no?
things summing up, but it's really not like that.
Cerco di fare un
I
esempio.
try to make one example.
Sentiamo il suono della campana.
We hear the sound of the bell, the bowl.
Possiamo sentire il suono della
Are we able
campana
to hear the sound
con
of
una
the
sensazione di
bowl
tristezza? È possibile?
with a feeling of sadness? Is it possible? Yes.
Posso sentire il suono della
Can I hear the
campana
sound
con
of
una
the
sensazione,
bowl
un'attitudine
through
interna di
an
gioia
inner attitude of joy
o addirittura di
or
rabbia?
even of anger? Yes.
In questo caso
In this case,
la gioia, la tristezza,
joy,
la
sadness,
rabbia,
anger,
eccetera,
and so on
fa parte
is part of the
dell'osservatore, chi
observer who
percepisce. È
perceives,
lo stato
is the
che
state that
percepisce.
perceives.
Il suono è
The sound
l'oggetto
is the object
percepito.
that is perceived.
La beatitudine
Bliss
fa riferimento
is about
all'osservatore,
the observer,
stato che
is the
percepisce,
state
e
that
ciò che
perceives,
viene
and
vissuto,
what
ciò che
is
viene
lived,
realizzato,
what is
percepito,
realized,
è la
perceived,
cosiddetta vacuità.
is the so-called
Però
emptiness.
viene fatto in tal
But
modo
it's done in
in
such
cui
a way
l'oggetto
that
che viene
the object
percepito è la
that is
vacuità
perceived is emptiness
dell'osservatore stesso.
of the observer itself.
Lì si crea
And
un
that's where it
qualcosa
creates,
dove
there is like
è come l'acqua che si mette con
the
l'acqua.
water
Non
mixing
si
with
può
the
più
water, and you cannot
distinguere
distinguish anymore one from the other.
quando diciamo beatitudine,
When we talk
vacuità,
about
perché
bliss
si
and
parla di
emptiness, why
beatitudine?
do we talk about bliss?
Se noi vediamo nella
If
pratica
we
dell'autoguarigione,
look at
molto
the
spesso
practice of
andremo a
self-healing, very
invocare
often
questo
we
stato
will
di beatitudine.
invoke this state
Fare
of
le
bliss
offerte.
in making the
Se noi
offerings.
vediamo nel Vajrayana,
If we
anche
look
qua
in
abbiamo nel
Vajrayana
mandala
and also in the
tutti gli
mandala,
oggetti di
we have all
piacere
the
dei
objects
sensi.
of pleasures of the senses.
Sono il cibo
We have the
buono,
good food,
le cose da bere,
things to
piuttosto che i
drink,
piaceri
or
sensoriali.
sensorial pleasures of
Dal
any kind,
piacere del
from the
tatto,
pleasure
del
of
tessuto,
touching, of the
dell'odore,
cloth,
dell'incenso,
the
di
smell of
vedere
the
la
incense, of
luce,
seeing the
di
light,
sentire la
of
musica, fino al
hearing
piacere
music,
del corpo
until the
più
pleasure
profondo come il piacere del sesso
of
sessuale,
the
e
like
così via.
the
Tutto questo
sexual
viene
union.
rappresentato
All of
come
this is
uno
represented
strumento
as
per
a
aiutarci ad
tool
entrare in
to help us
contatto con
to
questo
get in touch
sentimento
with this
profondo di
deeper
beatitudine,
feeling of bliss,
di godimento,
of
sensazione di
enjoyment,
piacere.
sensation of pleasure. Why?
Immaginiamo un terreno
Let's imagine like
con tanti
some
strati,
ground,
come è fatto il terreno normalmente,
like
no? Ci abbiamo
with many
delle
layers,
piramidi
like it's
raccolte
normally done.
coltivo,
Like there's
poi
like the
sotto
black
ci sono
earth, the
vari
one that you
strati del
cultivate,
terreno.
dark one. Then you have various
Immaginiamo che in
layers
questa
of the ground.
terra la
And
parte
let's imagine that
superiore
in these
rappresenta la
layers,
nostra
the
mente
upper part
grossolana,
represents our gross
la
mind,
nostra parte
our
razionale,
rational part.
sotto c'è la nostra
And
parte
below
più
that, there is
emotiva,
our
la
more
cosiddetta
emotional part, the
inconscia, se
so-called
volessimo
unconscious,
chiamare,
if we would
quella
like to
non
call it like that,
manifestata,
the one that is
e sotto
non-manifest.
ancora
And below
c'è
that,
quella che è la nostra mente molto
there is
sottile,
our
che è dove
very
ci
subtle
sono le
mind,
impronte.
that is
Se
where
volessimo
the
fare
imprints are.
un'analogia
So
a
if we
una
wanted to
nostra
make an
realtà
analogy to
fisica,
our physical
sarebbe
reality,
questo,
would
la
be like
parte
this.
grossolana
The gross part
riguarda il
is
corpo e la
about
mente
the body
manifestati,
and
la
mind that are
parte
manifest.
sottile è la mente
The
non
subtle
manifestata,
is
è la
the
parte
mind that
energetica
is
del nostro
non-manifest, the
corpo.
energetical
La
part
parte
of our
molto
body, and the very
sottile
subtle
sono le
part are the
predisposizioni che
predispositions that we
abbiamo
have
molto simili al
in
DNA.
a very similar way to the DNA.
Se noi andiamo a vedere la
If
parte
we see
genetica,
the genetical part,
quando un bambino o una
when
bambina
a
nasce,
baby is born,
porta con
it
sé
brings
un suo
with him
bagaglio
or her
genetico, no? La cosa
genetic
interessante è che nel
baggage.
DNA,
And
il
the
DNA
interesting
ha
thing
una
is that
realtà
in the DNA,
probabilistica e non
the DNA has a
deterministica.
probabilistic nature and
Vale a
not
dire,
non-deterministic.
se una
It
persona ha un
means that
certo DNA,
if a
non
person
vuol
has a
dire che
certain
per
DNA, it
forza
doesn't
di
mean
cose
that
quello si manifesterà.
that thing will manifest, will have to
Nasce con
manifest.
più
One is
possibilità,
born
non
with many
infinite, ma più
possibilities, non-infinite,
possibilità,
but
e a
many possibilities.
secondo di quello che
And
viene
according
chiamato
to what is called in the
nell'epigenetica
epigenetics field,
l'ambiente interno ed
the
esterno
inner and
con
outer
cui va a
environment
interagire,
with which
si
it
va ad
interacts,
accedere a certi geni,
some
svegliarsi,
genes
in modo
are
da dire,
woken up, or an
l'ambiente
access to,
esterno fa
rather than
riferimento a
others.
tutto quello
The
che
outer
vediamo e
environment
interagiamo
is
fuori,
about everything that we
l'ambiente
relate
interno
with
fa
outside.
riferimento alle
The
nostre
inner
proprie
environment is
pensieri, alle
about our own
nostre
thoughts,
proprie
our
azioni.
own emotions.
E anche da un punto di
And
vista
also from
scientifico,
a
da quello che ho capito
scientific
io,
point of view, from what
quale
I
dei due
understood,
ambienti ha un
what
potere
of the two
maggiore di far
environments has a
accedere
greater
a
power
a una
to make us access to a part of the DNA or the other, the inner environment.
Nella visione del buddismo
In the Buddhist view, it is said that when we are born, we already come with a baggage that comes from other lives. There are some imprints, predispositions that we have, like seeds. That energy that is given is that of seeds, so the ground is our mental continuum. The predispositions are like seeds. The experiences that we have during time, over time, are the conditions that we have, the sun, the water, the fertilizing, that allow that seeds to sprout and to grow and generate further seeds. In other words, the manifestation on a gross level reflects what is there on the subtle level. What is on the subtle level reflects what is on a very subtle level. That is, it's not possible to experience on a gross level what on a subtle level doesn't exist. And it's not possible that something is manifested in a subtle level if on a very subtle level there are no predispositions for that. In other words, I can pour all the water that I want, put all the fertilizing that I want, fertilizer. If there are no seeds, the plant cannot grow. So these seeds, these predispositions are those that are at our very subtle level. The main goal that is in the practice of the Buddhist path is that of being able to transform ourselves positively on a very subtle level, to work on those predispositions. It's not just on the gross level. And mainly to be able to transform and change in a very subtle level. That is the main goal. Also because our mental defilements,
la nostra ignoranza.
Yes, our ignorance, our anger, jealousy, envy, and so on, it exists on a gross level when it's manifested, but exists on a subtle level when it works under the surface without being manifested. It's a bit like saying, to me it doesn't seem that anyone here is angry, I hope. But just to see like that, I could also say, okay, it doesn't seem like it. But the fact that we're not angry in this moment doesn't mean that we don't have anger. Okay, that anger that is there, but that is not manifest, is found in what is called the subtle mind, and in an unconscious way it works. And so it's more important to work on a subtle level rather than on a gross level. But what happens is that if I have the seeds, if I have the predispositions, for as much as I'm able to stop anger, even also on a subtle level, sooner or later, if I pour those seeds, what will happen is that again that anger will sprout and manifest itself again. So the goal is to change your being, not only on a conceptual level that is manifest on a gross level, but to transform on a deeper level, subtle level, but mostly at the level of the imprints, the so-called very subtle level. How can we eliminate a characteristic that we have from our mind, from our being? The only possible way is by generating the opposite one. It's like trying to generate a mind. For example, if to me always comes to my mind the example of I thought, okay, I don't like water, because this has been a process of mine. Me, at a certain point when I was a kid, I remember the day that I was like in front of the dispenser of water at home, drank a glass of water, and then I told myself, I don't like water. Water sucks. I don't like water. I don't know why. In that moment I told myself that. And I went through a process that partly got closed, but I still have to improve it. Okay, I like water because I saw that thought, I don't like water, is not good. And the interesting thing is that if I have the thought, I don't like water, I could say myself, water is is good, the taste is nice, it's important to drink it, and so on. I can give myself thousands of reasons, but as long as the thought I don't like water is present, I'm not able to remove it. The only way that I can remove the thought I don't like water is to generate the thought I like water. I need to generate the directly opposite one. So, on a practical level, also this, what does it mean? If we want to eliminate a certain mental state, the only possible way really is to generate the one directly opposite. If I generate a certain thought on a gross conceptual level, me at that moment I am opposing and eliminating at least momentarily that gross thought. So I'm saying and thinking I like water, I'm not able to think at the same time I don't like water. So I'm able to induce myself to the thought I like water. Okay, in the moment it's not there, but as soon as it stops on the conceptual level, because it's something that I have deeper inside of me, when I get distracted and so on, what comes back is I don't like water. And so here I need to repeat it many times, many times, many times, many times, until it gets on a deeper, on a subtle level. If I'm able to generate on a more subtle level, let's use the example I like water, on a subtle level, I will not be able to have at the same moment that inner state that says I don't like water. They are directly opposite, they cannot go together. So if I want to eliminate a certain mental state on a very subtle state, very subtle level, the only possible way is to generate the direct opposite on a very subtle level. The root of our suffering, the primary cause of our suffering is our selfishness, the obsession with self-gratification, and the deepest cause, the root of this selfishness is the grasping to autonomous, objective, intrinsic existence. These are the various words to say the same thing. Then we can further on talk more about this. But from this perception that reality and that we ourselves exist in an autonomous, independent, objective way, is born the obsession with self-gratification and selfishness. From selfishness, attraction and aversion arise, and so hatred and attachment and so on, and so suffering. And so this selfishness and even more and further this ignorance of grasping to existence as if it was autonomous, independent, thus it exists in a gross level, on a subtle level, but it's something that we bring with ourselves on a very subtle level. So in order to be able by all means to change this, we need to work in the development of love and wisdom on a very subtle level. And here it's not simple. There are two paths that are transmitted. Let's go back to the image of the ground. The first layer is the gross mind, the broader, wider. Then below that there is a subtle, and then the very subtle, that is like the basis from which the seeds come and manifest outside. It's like, okay, the very subtle mind is where all the seeds are, the deepest level. The subtle level is where all the roots are growing, and the gross mind is where they're manifested outside, the leaves and so on. I can cut all the leaves and the branches, but if the roots are strong, they will grow back again. I can remove the roots, but if there are still the seeds, then they will come back. So, here let's imagine that we want to access, to transform these three levels. One way to do that is to work on a gross level, as if I was pouring some water on a gross level. But I need to pour a lot of water, because a part of that water evaporates, a part is absorbed, and until it's really able to wet also the lower layer, I need to pour a lot of water. Like, okay, if the ground is very dry, the majority of water will just go away, so I need to pour it a lot and bit by bit How do you pour it on a gross level? With our conduct of body, speech, and mind. So I need to create some healthy habits, talk in a certain way, act in a certain way, think in a certain way. The more that I do it, the more, bit by bit, that gets to a deeper level. The more I act with love and altruism, the more that feeling of love and altruism permeates on a deeper level, more subtle. When that level of that subtle state is very permeated, the more is permeated by that state, the more it creates imprints and creates these seeds on a very subtle level, transforming what is there at a very subtle level. In other words, I act on a superficial level. With that, gradually, in time, over time, I transform what is there in an unconscious, deeper, more subtle level. And what happens on a very subtle on a subtle level, in its turn, conditions our predisposition and transforms them on a very subtle level. The path is long. Also, because it's not like we pour just one thing. We pour some water, we pour some poison, we pour a bit of everything on a gross level. So there is the part of love, but there is also the part of selfishness. And we, in our behaviors, it's not like they are linear in one direction, isn't it? So to make a coherent transformation is difficult. It's a bit like the training for Olympiads. Olympics, an athlete that wants to go to an Olympics. There is an aspect of this training that is really difficult. Like an athlete that is training, okay, let's use the example of running. Every day of training, you bit by bit have to manage to be able to do the same distance in a shorter time. From one day you can, and to the other you cannot get to the world record. You start to train and bit by bit, one day to the other, you decrease the time. If every day it decreases of, I don't know, 5 seconds, or decreases of 1 second or whatever, it's the same. Every day 1 second less. Okay, good. Then one day the athlete says, now today I really don't feel like training. He doesn't train. He got to 8 seconds, the day after he should get to 7. The day of the 7 he didn't train. The day after that, in the calculation, he should get to 6, but skipped the 7. One day he doesn't train, the day after he goes back to training. What time is he able to perform? The day? Like 7? Or no, 9. For every day that he stopped, he goes like 2 days back, 2 steps back. I had to get to 7, I stopped. The day after, I didn't stay at 7, I am at 9. And the more days I stop, the more I go backwards. And that's also why when there was the COVID that they postponed the Olympics for one year, for the athletes it was tremendously difficult, because to maintain that level of training is very challenging, it's very tiring, and they had to do it for 1 year more, because one just needs to stop and one goes back. I don't want to say that it's exactly like that on a spiritual level, otherwise we were really screwed. But on many aspects it's similar. If I start to train myself and have inner presence and train to myself to have more love and compassion, to be more generous, the more I'm able to have constancy, then the more that transformation happens on a deeper level. And also on a gross level, to create a habit, we need to repeat that same thing for at least around 42 days. It is said that if we want to create a habit, like whatever habit, like to wake up early in the morning, jump 3 times after we woke up, I don't know, don't drink coffee anymore, think about whatever that one wants to do. It is said that, or at least so I read, on average one should repeat that thing for like 42 days, because this is the time that is necessary to create and establish new neuronal paths.
Ripeto, quella cosa
So I repeat that thing, the beginning is difficult, then the 30th day becomes even more difficult, there is a moment that seems like that it's impossible, then after like 42, 45 days, then it becomes much easier, because we created a habit on a neuronal level. This then gets to a much deeper aspect as we maintain it over time, becomes a deeper habit.
Perciò il nostro percorso
And so our path from day to day, from year to year, and from life to life, to transform what we have on a very subtle level. This is the main goal.
A un certo punto
At
qualcuno
a certain point, someone asked himself, but isn't there like a quicker path? Because Buddha Shakyamuni described that this path, in order to reach the final state of Buddhahood, if one would ask how much time is needed, since when you seriously start, you need at least like 3 eons.
non qualunque eone,
Not any eon. 3 eons, incalculable eons, because there are many types of eons. Eon is an era, a period of time, and there are like in the Vedic ancient tradition in India, when you calculate time, the number tranme means one tranme, one innumerable is like 1 with 50 zeros. I don't know, how is that called in our, I don't know, but when I studied the part of astrology, there were the names for the numbers, like the unity of 1, the unity of 10, the unity of 100, of 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, each one of them as a name until getting to 50 zeros. So, and the number with 50 zeros is called incalculable. So 5 incalculables is 5 with 50 zeros. So when we talk about an incalculable eon, is this period of time that is extremely, extremely long. And Buddha Shakyamuni said that if one walks the normal path, you need 3 eons that are incalculable to reach the state of Buddhahood. There is a thing that comes to our favor. Time is relative. So, time is something that is not lived in the same exact way from one and the other. And here, there also exists in the teachings of Buddha the part of cosmology where it's explained how this universe is composed of various realms of existence. And there is a table that I saw once that can also be recreated from the teachings of Buddha, the part that is called Abhidharma, where there is the relativity of time in each one of the realms. For example, one day in Tushita, the pure land of Tushita, that is the 33rd realm of the gods, which is divided in 33. The highest level, which is the 33rd, one day there, one morning there is related to 50 years of us. Then there are all these kind of relations. And if we check from the point of view of physics, time depends totally on the gravitational field. So how much time passes, or how does it pass? Also here it's interesting to see that time flows in a different way if we are at the sea or in the mountains. It's something that maybe in our conception, ordinary conception, we have a hard time to perceive it. But even there are some clocks of a level of precision that are very high, that from what I read cost like 1,500 euros, you can buy them. And if one experiments and takes 2 clocks like this, synchronized in the same way, one you keep it at the sea, and the other you bring it in the high mountains, and 1 year later, 1 month, you put them together back again, they are not synchronized anymore. Some time more passed one place rather than the other. In this moment, this is just to say the time is relative. So 3 eons, what does it mean? To be sincere, the answer is I don't know. Because I cannot calculate 3 eons starting from my concept of time where I am. The answer is a lot of time, which means that it's a gradual process, something that is done one day after the other, 1 year after the other, one life after the other, bit by bit, slowly, slowly. And even this very life seems like a lot, but actually it's nothing compared to the whole. And also the time of Buddha, some disciples that were more prepared somehow. Buddha said, okay, look, this is the normal path. Do you want to go for a quick one? It's possible. And in order to understand the basic theory is the following. What we want to do is transform what is in the lowest layer, on a very subtle level. And we want to develop love and wisdom in opposition to selfishness and ignorance on a very subtle level. And here there are just 2 possibilities. Either I work layer by layer to then be able to transform from the gross to the subtle, from the subtle to the very subtle, and it's a very long process. Or I am able to somehow drill, I make a hole that gets until the deepest part, and then I pour not poison but good water, so that then it gets directly to the deepest part. In other words, if I am able to generate a state of love and wisdom on a very subtle level, naturally I am familiarizing with love and wisdom on a very subtle level. So, simplifying even too much, what is the theory? I generate love and wisdom. I bring that love and wisdom from a gross level of consciousness to a subtle level and a very subtle level, so that I can transform myself not only on a gross level, but directly on a deeper level. Bliss is that drill, is that dwell. For example, when we feel pleasure, imagine any pleasure. When you eat something nice, the pleasure of sex, in the moment of enjoyment, in the moment of pleasure, like, where is mind? In the past, in the future, or in the present? Usually, is in the present. As one is feeling pleasure, mind is not so much on a rational level. In the moment of pleasure, the more intense the pleasure is, the more this is true. One is like there judging, thinking, or is one really living just that moment? And that's it. The enjoyment, the pleasure, the so-called bliss, that is a tool that allows us to bring ourselves, 1, to the present moment, and 2, to transcend the rational conceptual state, of bringing ourselves beyond. From a subtle point of view, also physics, it is said that when it is said that when the state of bliss is very intense, the senses cease because the winds, the prana, absorb into the central channel. So it is described that in a moment of strong enjoyment, one loses touch also with the pain, doesn't feel pain, or it's not in touch with the senses, and just living that pleasure. And that is a tool that pushes naturally a being to get to a deeper level of consciousness, where the various winds, pranas, get into the central channel, the 5 outer senses cease, and it brings mind to a deeper level. What happens if I generate a state of this kind with an attitude of attachment.
Io porto l'attaccamento da un
I
livello
bring the attachment from a gross level to a very subtle level. I made a drill and I poured some attachment in it. So it's for that if I generate a state of pleasure, of bliss, that is deep, strong, it brings me from a gross level to a more deep level of consciousness, and I'm doing it with attachment. I'm doing nothing else but familiarizing myself with attachment on a deeper level. If I do it with selfishness, then I familiarize with selfishness. But actually, if I do it with love, with gratitude, with wisdom, what am I doing? I am bringing that feeling of love, that of wisdom, from a gross level to a more deeper level, and possibly a very subtle level. So when we're talking about bliss, bliss is the tool, is the mean to bring the practitioner from a gross level to a subtle level, and possibly very subtle level. Bliss by itself is worth nothing. If pleasure would be a cause of spiritual growth, the world would be full of beings that were very evolved. The problem is that if we think, okay, the majority of cases that we induce ourselves to a state of pleasure, like from eating food or sexual pleasure, what attitude do we do it with? Love and compassion, wisdom, or predominantly selfishness and attachment? Predominantly is I want the pleasure for myself. It's a place of attachment. And so it's something that increases. The more I live it, the more it increases that feeling of attachment. Nothing against pleasure. Pleasure, on whatever level, we use the word pleasure, but it's the bliss, the enjoyment. It's just a tool, it's just a mean, it's something that by itself is neither good or bad, but it's a very powerful tool. For example, what happens when one's own sexual energy is used as a tool of violence? It leaves some deep damage. It's an energy that has a non-indifferent power, and one of the fundamental characteristics is the capacity of bringing us from a more gross level to a more subtle level. What is described is that at the moment, in particular during the orgasm, what happens is that the winds absorb and the being enters a more subtle level, very similar to what happens at the moment of death. This is lived through a positive state, then it increases that positive state. If it's lived in a negative way, it increases that. I believe that this is quite clear. So, in Vajrayana Buddhism, in the Tantra, one of the main points is to learn gradually to induce oneself to the state of bliss, but not by oneself, having at the basis love and compassion and wisdom. These are the fundamental points. So it's for this that more times in the practice we will repeat love, compassion and emptiness, bliss and emptiness, because bliss is related to bliss, to the pleasure, to this physical state that brings the being to a deeper state of consciousness, and emptiness actually unites two things, which is called the absolute bodhicitta. Unites the basis of love and compassion, that is the basis of the motivation, with a non-conceptual comprehension of the interdependence, of emptiness of intrinsic autonomous existence. And this is the effective antidote for on one hand selfishness and ignorance on the other hand. All of this to give a more clear idea of what we mean by union of bliss and emptiness. Also, when we look at the union of Dodge and Bell, male and female. We are talking about using this tool of bliss to induce ourselves to a deeper state of consciousness with love and wisdom to transform ourselves on a deeper level. And if we see the practice of self-healing, in a few words, works like that.
Generiamo la motivazione,
generate motivation, love towards ourselves and towards the others, compassion, altruism, bodhicitta. With this at the basis, on our turn we ask then the blessings. We generate the mind, realizing the emptiness of intrinsic existence. On the basis of these two, everything dissolves. We generate a pure identity, but that it is based on love and wisdom. And then we build this pure identity. And also if we look at the 5 Dhyani Buddhas and all the symbology, it always unites these two aspects. Also, for example, look at the mudras, the gestures of the 5 Dhyani Buddhas. We have Vairocana, Amitabha, Akshobhya, Ratnasambhava, and Amoghasiddhi. What is the same in all 5 mudras? The left hand. It's not that it's just randomly like that. The left hand represents the part of wisdom. Do you remember? The right is the male, the left is the female. So the left is the wisdom, the right the method. The wisdom, with the left hand in this mudra, represents a part of the mind that is one-pointedly in a meditative state on the emptiness of intrinsic existence. And the right hand represents action, represents the manifestation in the world. So eliminating fear, generosity, generating stability. Amitabha is meditation itself, and Vairocana is the transmission of Dharma, helping beings spiritually. But there are always these two sides. On one hand you have concentration, on the other hand you have action. That also represents the part of the union of bliss and emptiness. They are always together. So, in the practice of self-healing, gradually we build a reality, we build the mandala. So, in the practice of self-healing, the mandala starts from the inner mandala, the mandala of body. And there is also an outer representation, but we build ourselves in this state of purity. The 5 chakras, the 5 Dhyani Buddhas arise, and then we gradually focus on those characteristics that increase more and more until we identify ourselves with each one of them. I am Amoghasiddhi, so I am power of realization, I am rejoicing, I am Ratnasambhava, so I am humility, generosity, I am Akshobhya, so I am love, patience, stability, joy. I am Amitabha, so I am satisfaction, concentration. I am Vairocana, so I am wisdom, I am infinite space, and so on. And from this we arise as Vajradhara, that we explained before. And I am the union of the 5 Dhyani Buddhas. What does this represent? I have an identity that is based on these qualities developed to their maximum potential. In this state of union, of bliss and emptiness. Then we have what is called the part of the secret initiation of wisdom and word of speech, that where what you do is you take that state of pure identity, that state of love and wisdom, and bring it from a gross level to a subtle level and then a very subtle level. The final part that is represented by the center of the mandala, and in our body mandala that everything absorbs at the heart, and we do Om Vishwa Shanti Hum, is really when all that state of love and wisdom is brought to a very subtle state, then transformed to a very subtle state, we manifest again on a gross level what we are but transformed.
Perciò,
And so,
per
to
concludere,
conclude,
quando andiamo a chiedere le
when we
benedizioni,
ask the blessings, that was the part that I was supposed to explain today.
io c'ho davanti a me Guru Buddha.
I have in front of me Guru Buddha.
Il punto non è una
The
stretta
point
esterna,
is not
tutto ciò
an
che
outer
Guru Buddha
aspect,
rappresenta.
it's everything that Buddha represents.
Ed è importante per noi
And
gradualmente.
it's important for us gradually to nourish this feeling, because I am in front of Guru Buddha, there is this state of balance, this state of union, of method and wisdom that lives constantly in a state of bliss, realizing the nature of everything and of himself, with a state of infinite inner space and unconditional love. And so we connect with this, and the more I'm able to connect with the characteristics and relate to the characteristic of Guru Buddha, the more I'm able to interact with them, and so to receive the blessings. So when we do Oma Guru Buddha Siddhi Hum in each one of the chakras, the rays of light and nectar come of the 5 colors. It's not just light and nectar. The white light that comes, it's like a light that is vibrating with the energy of wisdom, of infinite space. It has all the characteristics of Buddha Vairocana. The red light brings us satisfaction, the concentration, and sacred speech. And it's as if, as we get in touch with those 5 lights that are of the nature, of the qualities of each one of the 5 Dhyani Buddhas, it's as if we, once that we receive that light, couldn't do anything else but to vibrate at the same frequency. It's as if we were there, hearing a certain rhythm, and then someone comes and with a different rhythm and dancing a totally different rhythm. We're not able to remain at the previous rhythm, we have to follow the other one. This is also the energy that the blessing is, it's not that it changes us, it creates a condition so that we ourselves can change. Following this same analogy, is not that music and the dance of the other is what forces us to dance differently, but we let ourselves to be influenced and we dance like the other, to take that other rhythm. So this is the moment at the beginning of the practice where we imagine these rays of light coming, and we need to nourish these rays of light of meaning so that we can imagine those rays of light coming, and that we ourselves can start to be, to act, to be in the same way, with the same qualities. It's a bit like saying that in front of a state of deep love, we have a difficulty in feeling hate. One is not able to do that so much. I remember very often with Albagnano, it happened that one would go to him and maybe was angry for something. I remember our friend Franco telling that many times. When he was director of the center in Milan many years ago, sometimes he got so angry because of something, and then he said, no, I need to talk with Rinpoche, and then he wanted to kind of discuss and fight. And every time that I went to him, and he would receive it in his bedroom and would sit, then after a while, he just didn't know what to say anymore. That anger passed. And after a while, then, is everything fine? No, do you want something? No, it's okay. He dissolved. He was not able to maintain that state in the presence of Lama Ganchen. This is an example of a blessing. The strength of the stability of the other, of the love of the other, makes it so that one that is open to that is not able to just go in the same direction, to go in an opposite direction. And the clearer is for us what a Buddha is, what his qualities are, the more we're able to open up and to visualize more correctly this rays of light, which is not just light, but is what they bring. That is the most important thing. Now let's make our dedications.
Jetsun lame kotse rapten chi namkar tinle chokchur gepa dan losan tempe drume sasumgi drove munsel takto ne gyur chi kewa kunto yanda lama dang dralme cheki pela longche ching sadan lamge yunten rabzone Dorje change kopa nyur toba sho nimo dele tsendele nime kuyan delek shin yinsen takto delek pe kuncho sumke chinge lop kuncho sumke ngodrub tsol kuncho sumke trashishu. All'alba o al tramonto, di notte o durante il giorno, possano i tre gioielli concederci le loro benedizioni, possano aiutarci ad ottenere tutte le realizzazioni e cospargere il sentiero della nostra vita con molti segni di buon auspicio. At dawn or dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and sprinkle all the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness. Un'ultima cosa prima di
One last
fermarci,
thing before stopping, just
se no dopo diventa difficile
because otherwise
ricollegare
it becomes difficult to connect everything that we have said today on the part of the importance of the union,
maschile e femminile,
so
che è la
the
parte
male and female,
dell'unione,
that is
che in
the
realtà
part of union, that actually the parts become one, inseparable. That also means to not go at the extremes. It's the same thing that from another perspective is explained the middle way, the Madhyamika, that Buddha in the many contexts of teachings explained, talked about the importance of the middle way. It's the same thing. It's a point of reflection. Enjoy
ci
your
vediamo.
lunch and see you later.